Don't you love how we have to figure out how to clap, Steven? Like all over again? 3, 2, 1, press the button. 3, 2, 1, clap.
Well, it gets confusing with the audio podcast because I don't have video on my end.
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
One day you'll...
So I can't really sync up the clap like I would do with video. It gets a little confusing.
Anyway. But still we sound really good, and our podcasts always sound good. And you told me last week you did the car test. And it's not the car test.
I did.
It's not the car test from that movie, Leaving the Bronx, or A Bronx Tale, where he's like, the car test, where you put the girl's head in your lap, and while a car's coming by, and if she does it, she's a keeper. He's like, no, that's not the car test. I don't think.
No. It's simply a test listening to the audio back in my crappy Camry speakers, and if it sounds good there, then it's pretty much going to sound good anywhere.
Yeah, it sounded good for me in my car. With my Barry Levinson sound system in the Lexus.
Ooh.
It's not actually Barry Levinson, but we call it the Barry Levinson sound system because it's called something else, but only Lexus owners know it. Whatever. Anyway, hey guys, Jared Polin here, FroKnowsPhoto.com. Steven here. Hi.
Yes. FroKnowsPhoto.com.
Yeah, this is
.com.
This is a RAWtalk new episode 002 as we figure out what the hell we're going to be doing in the future. But we got great feedback last week from doing the audio podcast again, or doing a podcast again. I enjoy the conversation and topics and listening to what Steven has to say.
I mean, we do it anyway, so why not just record it?
Well, yeah, exactly. A lot of you guys sent us feedback via the text line, 313-710-9729. That is the text line. That is a pretty good way to get in touch with me. I have roughly 2,000 people on the list as of now, which is not as many compared to our 262,000 people on the email list, where we can send emails and reach, we get like 60 to 70,000 opens, which is actually still pretty good in the analytical grand scheme of things. That's a good amount of opens. But the reason I say 2,000 is because there's less people, which means more opportunity. If you do send a question through, that it will get to us and we might consider it, which we're going to do that later on in this episode, get back to some user questions. But there was good feedback about, some people are like, I just listen to the audio and I don't need the video. Some people are like, I like the video, or I like the options. Steven, you want to give your take again?
Same take as last week. I just think for the amount of effort we're going to put into it, I don't think it's going to get that many views on YouTube, and it's just strictly talking head, so there's really no reason to make it a visual-based podcast, in my opinion. I mean, I guess I understand if people do like watching podcasts and the reactions, it makes it a little better of a listen, but there's really nothing to show besides me and you talking.
Right, and my take on it is, I don't like the fact that it takes a lot of time to produce the video side of it, but when you've got 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube, you now have access to reach more people to make them aware of the fact that this thing does exist. Because I'm not sure how many people that when they watch Photo News Fix, which I put a plug in there for our podcast, actually convert to listeners. Now, we know that it works when it comes to advertisers because we've done it. I remember the first time Wirestock did something, and they were like, we got 3,000 signups in the first couple hours. We're like, well, wow. Yeah, it actually works when it's a product that there's an incentive to sign up. So, that part's good, and we know that it's effective. But the reason I think that a video is effective is because we can reach all of these other people. And if you get 20, 30,000 viewers, back in the day, I would have probably not been too happy with it. But 20 to 30,000 viewers on an hour-long thing, and you look at a watch time of like 30 minutes, but maybe it's not watch because they're also just listening, but it's another opportunity for us to maybe have sponsorships in there if we so choose to do that, which we did do with RAWtalk.
So would you be opposed to simply just putting up the audio in a video format on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm opposed to that.
Why?
Because I I was one of the first to kind of do something similar back in 2010 when I opened my Skype line up to everybody, which was like, hey, if I'm around my desk, which I was quite often, and you call my Skype line, I will answer the call. And I would say, hey, is it all right if I record this? And so I would record the questions coming in from people and my responses, and I'd put it up as audio recordings on YouTube. And it it kind of did pretty good because it was a way that I could make some content. I just think that in this being a visual medium, I think people, if they're going to take the time to go onto YouTube, they kind of want to see some stuff.
What about if we did a hybrid of that and we simply just recorded our Zoom calls like we did with RAWtalk during the pandemic, and we just basically did a multicam recording of each person's webcam? It's still visual based and the audio will be there, but it's not taking an entire day or two to produce and edit.
I don't know if I like that quality, and I know you definitely don't like that quality.
I don't, and I do throw that question out to not just you, but to the viewers as well.
So I'll give a quick backstory on the beginning of the podcast. Steven was on episode 2, 3, way back in the day.
2.
Yeah. RAWtalk 2 at my first loft that I rented, and at that time, one of my friends was like, you should just do audio because podcasts are audio and it's not video. And I was like, well, that kind of doesn't make any sense because I have all these people over here on YouTube watching my videos. How are they going to become aware of this, right? Why not go to where they are? And just because podcasts have been audio doesn't mean that it needs to stay audio. And so, I don't know, a couple episodes in, I started throwing the GoPro up. But then when you came along, the quality just kept getting better and better and better. And then we turned it into like a real live show. So it's just a matter of how far do we want to push it?
I'm all about quality, 100%. I will put the effort there, but I know you won't want me to take the time.
I don't
to put the effort there.
But
so that's
that
what it
means
comes down to.
If I had someone else to edit that wasn't Dan and wasn't you, and someone that was like a part-time that had specific tasks for us, maybe TikTok content, maybe Instagram content, maybe Reels and Shorts, which is the same as Instagram content, but have a task to do X, right? Here's the footage, cut it together, let's put it up. Anyway.
Yeah, just know it's not that simple and it takes some time.
It's that simple, Steven. You know my answer.
Here's some footage. Make it work. Yeah, that's what Jared always tells me to do.
What Steven means by is like, Steven's like, so what are you thinking for this video? I'm like, all right, so Steven, I want you to do this, and then and blah, 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 blah means basically do all the things that you do to make it good. And that's the answer.
I don't know what I want, but I want it to be good.
I don't know what I want,
so
Steven.
Make something out of nothing.
Exactly. That's exactly what I want. You got it. You get me, Steven. You understand me.
Well, literally, though, over the years, I do understand what you want. There are definitely times where we don't really have to talk about what we want, just because we're kind of both on the same page at all times.
We try to be.
It's good. So we try to be. Yeah.
So moving along. The most dreaded time of year is when Steven decides to take a vacation. And in this case, it's more than just a vacation this time coming up. It's his honeymoon. Where are you going, Steven?
Ooh, the lavish Disney World. It's going to be a good time. We're going for 8 days.
Oh, my God.
We'll be going the end of June, and it should be a good time.
I'm
just dreading the heat, the weather.
Yes.
You know me, I don't do well in the sun.
No, you don't do well in the shade either.
I don't do well at all outside.
So, did your wife go ahead and make all of the reservations already?
Oh, yeah. That's been done for as soon as you can do it. I think it's like 6 months before the trip.
Yeah, so
you can make all the reservations, and the Fast Pass thing changed now. Now it's like Genie or whatever they call it.
Yeah, when I showed up to Disney in January, I had nothing.
Made 0 reservations.
I had nothing planned, and I'm like, what do you mean I can't come in to have lunch? Oh, you need a reservation. I'm like, I want to have lunch.
That's the thing is you, especially of all people, like having a nice sit-down dinner or lunch, and without a reservation, it's nearly impossible to get into. I mean, maybe as one person, it's not that bad.
Yeah, guess what, Steven? I got in for lunch, and I got in for dinner because I was like, I'm one person. I will sit at the bar. I don't care. Yeah. But this bullshit of 6 months in advance to come eat lunch or schedule a breakfast, and then you go to breakfast. I don't want to get angry, but then you go to breakfast and they have a Mickey waffle, and the Mickey waffle is like $19 fucking. I'm like, no,
that's Disney for you.
No, see, I hate Disney. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I hate Disney. I know you love Disney, and you're going to have a great time because it's the most wonderful place in the world for you two to go spend time going around the world. Make pretendly.
Literally. Around Epcot.
8 days. Yeah, I could not see 8 days in Disney. I just couldn't do it.
Well, the thing is, we were going to switch it up and do like 4 or 5 days in Disney, like an extended weekend, and then do an actual like all-inclusive somewhere for about a week.
I suggested Aruba.
The issue then was COVID was spiking back up and the pandemic was going nowhere. So it was scary to kind of book these trips that far in advance. So we ended up not booking anything else. We did Disney and then just extended that trip to 8 days now. And maybe in the future we'll do an all-inclusive or something like that, which is more of what I wanted. And she wanted more of the Disney trip, but I'm fine with just doing Disney.
So you're saying you compromised?
Yes. Yep.
I don't know what even that means.
It's all about compromise.
Okay. Well, speaking of getting married, Steven got married. I was at the wedding. I had a really good view. I had a pole right in front of me, so I was like, this is the best view ever.
I think we put you at like the worst possible table.
Table 25 with Dan, Todd's wife, my date.
The issue is we put all family, basically all closest to us in the middle, and then all friends or coworkers or whatever else it may be were to the end. But we had to add an extra table on, which was your table. And the issue is in the actual drawing, the mock-up they had of the table seating, they didn't show the pole. So I had no idea there was going to be a giant like pole right in front of you.
Yeah, it was great. It's like, oh, it's a great pole. Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is because you had 2 wedding cakes. You had the one wedding cake, and then you had the cake that looked like your lawn that you mowed. And I had to hunt down the servers to get a piece of that cake because it was chocolate. It was a moist chocolate cake that was really good.
And that's exactly what I wanted.
Right, but you had to compromise and get the other cake, funfetti, that your wife wanted in the bigger cake, which I will tell you, the funfetti was okay.
Well, and I do think, I think most people prefer funfetti.
No, they
the
don't.
General audience. I think chocolate is more limiting, even though I prefer chocolate, and I know you do as well. So we did funfetti for everybody, and then she surprised me with the groomsman cake the day of.
See, this is where,
that was chocolate.
If we were on YouTube, I'd be like, guys, hashtag down below, hashtag funfetti, hashtag funfetti sucks. Right? But we don't have that right now. See, that's one of the things we can't do. We don't have the interaction. Plus, we're not live. If we were live, well, we always talked, and I'm going back on that, but live always makes it more difficult because I don't like taking live questions because you never know what you're going to get. That's one of the reasons we started recording again after we did the Spreecast stuff back in the day, is because I was tired of shitty questions live, and I wanted to pick the questions.
You really need to vet out those questions,
Exactly.
and also there's going to be some ridiculous questions in general that,
But the reason I bring up, excuse me, the reason I brought up the cake is when I was in Miami 2 weeks ago as arm candy for a wedding, we went to this place, it was for rehearsal dinner, and it said, world's best chocolate cake. And I like chocolate cake. So I'm like, okay, you have the world's best chocolate cake. I'm going to ask for some of that. So the world's best chocolate cake comes out. I look at it and I'm like, this isn't cake. This is like mousse. That's not cake. Cake is what Steven had. Cake is like a Devil's Food, Betty Crocker, Duncan Hines, Devil's
1000%.
Food cake. It's moist, it's gooey, and it's tasty, right?
Yes.
This was garbage. So I tried it. I'm like, this is not the world's best cake because it's not cake. Well, last night I was at Vernick Fish in Philly, which is a very nice place to go. I did not wear sleeves. I was underdressed compared to the other people in suits, but
that's weird.
I didn't care.
You underdressed?
Yeah.
No.
So I was dressed in my finest jeans. I wear my only pair of jeans. So they're fresher right now. But on the menu, they're like, we have hazelnut chocolate layer cake. I'm like, well, hazelnut, okay, fine, I could deal with that. I like Filberts, they're good, but chocolate layer cake, that means you're going to get layers of chocolate cake. That's like moist and shit. And so it comes out, and I look at it, and it's like in the consistency of like a Twix bar, and then you cut it, and then you open it. There's not one piece of layer cake or chocolate cake in this whole dessert. The way the waitress described it, let me see, what did she say? Because I had to send it to a friend. I was telling them about this, and basically it was something like a Ferrero Rocher chocolate ball. So it's similar to whatever a Ferrero Rocher chocolate ball is, which has nothing to do with cake. So I took one bite and I pushed it to the middle of the table, and she came back over and she's like, "Did you enjoy it?" I'm like, "No, it's not cake." She's like, "You're right. It's not really cake." And so she ended up, I didn't ask her to take it off the thing. She took it off the thing. And then I saw the manager guy come down. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, dinner was awesome. All the courses were great, but that dessert, I'm not a big fan of it. And he's like, well, why? I'm like, because it said chocolate layer cake, and it's not actually cake. There's no layers of chocolate. He goes, well, what would you call it? I said, not cake. Anything but cake, because it's not layer cake. Wait, is this what got me in trouble during the Olympus video that we put up and then took down because people got upset about the chocolate cake I was talking about? And I was talking about
basically.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I just wanted to talk about chocolate cake. I know this is a very important topic for people because they also like chocolate cake and would be disappointed as well.
That's a great story.
You're welcome. Getting into the photo stuff before we get to the news discussions, let's talk about I am headed to Chicago on the 13th, which is Monday, and I'm coming home Wednesday because my brother was invited to go to some Cubs games out in Chicago and was like, you want to go? You've got your pass that gets you into every stadium. I was like, okay, I'll go. And so the good news is I got to talk to the Cubs photographer. He actually critiqued some of my work. He's like, I sent him some of the photos that I've done recently. He's like, He's like, would you like a critique? And I was like, sure. So we talked on the phone for an hour. But I also told him that I'm going to have this guy, Brad Mangan, who's an old-time sports shooter, very big, with tons of Sports Illustrated, tons of stuff. I already talked to him about doing a recorded critique of my work so I can share with you guys a professional baseball photographer critiquing my unprofessional baseball stuff, which I think is still pretty professional, but giving me the feedback of what they look for or what his Sports Illustrated managers, what were they called? Editors. What his Sports Illustrated editors used to say to him. Like, for example, he would say something like, don't come back with baseball card shots, which is literally the guy standing in the box, find better pictures, which is the photojournalistic aspect. So anyway, I'm going to Chicago. I'm taking the Canon R3, and I'm not taking any big ass glass because I don't want to carry it, but I just want to shoot at Wrigley. And so I'm going to shoot on Monday night, and I'll probably go back Tuesday myself to go just try to get some cool pictures that showcase baseball, but also the stadium.
Are you actually going to meet up with this photographer that you talked to?
Yeah, because he's the team photographer. I just want to say hi, and he's watched the stuff. He's watched our videos for a while too. So it's just really, I got his number through Brad, which was cool because Brad's like, hey, if you need to get in touch with anybody, it's always good to touch base with the team photographer when you go to a different city because rules are a little different from stadium to stadium.
Sure.
And so that's always a good thing is to touch base with the people in charge. So I talked to him on the phone. We're all good.
What did he have to say about your photos? In terms of the critique?
Well, he loved the vibrance of color. He liked the tones and the color. And I'm like, well, Skittles. Good delay, Steven. I say that because I use Skittles a lot as a starting point. But really,
you're welcome.
What I said to him was, yeah, because I actually edit RAW files, whereas most sports shooters don't.
It's straight
take
up
the JPEGs.
Yeah.
And even if you tweak a JPEG, it can still get the same colors that we get. It's just that people don't ever actually take the time. And with that being said, I sent Steven a photo that was posted on another Instagram from a baseball game I'll leave it at that. And I was just like, this isn't even edited. This color is just so atrocious that they just shipped it. And that's a problem.
Well, it also looked like the white balance was just extremely off on a JPEG. And they either tried to correct it or the auto white balance in general just did not work out in their favor.
Do you know why? Because the shade had creeped in on home plate.
I saw
so it was sunny in the background and it was this in the foreground, which means it's going to make it's going to probably read the yellow background, the brighter background and get the white balance for that. And then the shade is going to be cooler because of that. And it's going to be more blue. And it just looked absolutely atrociously terrible.
And personally, I can always tell when it's, I know you can as well, when it's a JPEG, just based on the lack of sharpness, the almost artifacting to a certain extent. It just looks off. Well, it doesn't look critically tack sharp like a RAW photo.
And I noticed that with the R7 and R10 stuff, when we shot JPEG and RAW and couldn't open the RAW files at the time, it was like, this is terrible, right? So it wasn't terrible, but it's like, you know that we can do better with the RAW file. And we did. When I opened the RAW files from the R7 and R10, I was like, oh man, it's like a world of difference. I mean, it's not even an argument anymore to have this RAW versus JPEG thing, even for sports shooters. So what he does as a sports shooter, as a team photographer, is he's shooting an A1 and he shoots RAW and JPEG, and the JPEGs are auto-transferring directly out so that they can be uploaded to social instantly, as is. But he has 50 megapixels to work with the RAW files for when they're doing banners and important stuff around the stadium or anything else. He has the RAW files to go back to and always uses those. So I get it. For the instant stuff out into the world, yeah, you want it out there quick, sure, the JPEG is going to be perfectly fine. But I think every sports shooter should shoot both.
And that's, I mean, even just from a concert photography standpoint too, I would do the same when I would cover for the radio station events. I would do RAW and JPEG, and then they would instantly upload the JPEGs in the background as we were shooting. So the band would go off. I was not happy with how they looked, because they would also tweak them to a certain extent and kind of edit them. And I just did not like the editing that was done. So I would go and usually tweak them after the fact when I got home, and then re-upload my edits with the actual RAW files. And it was literally night and day. I mean, you could really tell when you went from a JPEG to the edited RAW file after the fact. And again, just like you're saying, they would use the RAW files for anything needed around the website, any banners, any ads, stuff like that. So it was always nice to have that power if you wanted to go back to it.
Exactly. So being that we're talking about the R3, I'm working currently on the R3 1 year later review. And no, it hasn't been 1 year yet. That was November 27th. But yeah, by the time we get it done, look, if it's 8-9 months, I still call it the 1 year later review, because when the majority of people are going to watch it,
it's going to live on for years.
It's going to live on for a while. And I kind of like doing, my dad asked me, like, why do you do a 1 year later review? I'm like, well, because
you double dip.
Well, that is the one thing. I'm like, because it's actually a good way to get more views from a business standpoint, but also to update, because you've used it longer, you've used it more. Whereas, you know, there are people out there, and we've done it in the past, where we spend a day using the equipment and do a real world review of it there, but we also try to leave it a little open-ended in some ways, that we come back and make corrections if we need to make corrections. Kind of this is what lets us do that.
Well, yeah, and you figure out all the quirks and all the things that don't work and do work well, and all the hidden features as you're using it for many, many months or a year later. So it's always nice to revisit it after the initial review, when you're just told, here are the top level specs, go to town, you have a day, you know?
Exactly, because you always discover something a little later.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And it was going to take me a minute to write this thing. I had a lot of distractions today, even though I was focused. Yeah. I still want to get it done. It's going to be good, because I've shot a ton of stuff. I wrote in there, I'm like, I've shot everything from soccer. There's college soccer, professional soccer, little Dan's son running around in the park, which we have footage of. I did kickboxing. I did ice hockey. I've done professional bowling, so low light situations there. The Philadelphia Phillies, low light at Will Yip's studio with the band Soulblind.
Very low light there.
Right, yeah. So being able to photograph, that was the time, that was where my head started to spin a little bit with the R3. When we used it there to go do the filming of a real world review, which we did. We spent a couple hours there filming. That's how we would do real world reviews. There was a few times I turned to Steve and I was like, I just really like this. I like the feel of the autofocus. I like the feel of the body. I like the lens choices that I have, and I like the results that I'm getting. It was right there. I was like, this just feels right. And, you know, it was months later when I finally decided to take it with me to the bowling. And from that point on, this is the camera for me as of right now. But my reasons for not jumping over to using Canon more often, as I've said a bunch of times, was one, the EVF I can't record, but more importantly, it was, what if I like it? Because that just makes it more difficult for me to make a decision.
What people don't know is we went back and forth on the phone for a day or two before your trip, trying to figure out what you wanted to bring, and you eventually went with the R3. But you kept going back and forth. You would give me a call and be like, yeah, but what about this spec, or what about this? And then you would give me a call an hour later. Okay, man, but what about that camera? Yeah. What about this? I mean, it was a tough decision to make, because they both are stellar cameras.
Yeah.
And again, for the EVF recording aspect, I mean, that obviously is very helpful for us content wise. But I do really like these 1 year later reviews because, one, as a viewer, a general viewer, trying to find a good review, I'd prefer the 1 year later, because then you really have someone's full year of using that camera, their take about all the issues with it, pros or cons. So it's really nice to get that. And it's a nice summary for us of all the ancillary content that we made around the R3. We can now pack it into one video instead of trying to watch 7 or 8 different videos we made throughout the year. So I really like it as, again, just a general summary of the R3.
I agree, Steven. So let's move on to some of the news, a news discussion. If you came here from Photo News Fix, thank you for coming here. I talked on there about we'll go deeper into news stories that deserve to go in deeper, whereas the 3 new Sony lenses, they don't really deserve to go in deeper. We don't care about them that much, and there's not much to say about lenses here.
It's very hard to do, yeah.
When we're talking about it. And the other, there's a main story to talk about. We'll get to that from the last fix. That's going to be the Sony A7R5 spec leak. We're going to talk about that. But first, let's look at Instagram, because this is a story that I may put in to the next fix or may not, whatever, but I think it's worth talking about here. That Instagram announced a few changes that were coming up where they allow you to pin a post to be your top pinned post, which is actually pretty good, because as a creative, if there's something we want to market or something we want to sell or something we want to focus on, that's the first thing that people see. Kind of like a portfolio, really. Like if you did a reel for yourself, if you did like speaking of reels, I might as well mention that they've extended it to 90 seconds. So instead of just 60, it was 30 or 15 when it first started. Then they extended it to 60, and now they're extending it to 90 seconds to do a reel. And imagine you create a sizzle reel for yourself and you can pin it there finally, and that's like that is like a portfolio piece right there.
I think of it as essentially the main YouTube channel video. When you go to someone's YouTube page, you see that first and foremost, and it auto plays. It's kind of like that. Here's an introduction to the channel, introduction to the content that we create. Yeah,
that's good. But my joke about the whole thing is, well, reels are now 90 seconds. What's next? What's YouTube going to extend out shorts to unlimited time? And I made that joke the other day on Instagram, and the point I was getting at is, yeah, the shorts can only take you so far, but long form content, and look, 4 minutes, 5 minutes is considered, in my opinion, long form content compared to this stuff. YouTube's just going to get to that point. It's just, the shorts are kind of dumb. They really are. They're good in some way, but just building and building and building off of that, now you need to convert people to watch your long form stuff. I do know that TikTok gives you 3 or 4 minutes maximum, and I know TikTok is going to extend that to a longer form because they already have a shit ton of people watching, and more people watch TikTok every day than YouTube in terms of time. It's just insane how much time is on TikTok, yet it's just, a lot of it's mindless dribble. And that's another thing is, will you be able to make content that's not just mindless dribble, that these people who just want to swipe and swipe and swipe and swipe and scroll and swipe and scroll, to then sit and actually interact and pay attention to a longer form piece of content?
I mean, there are a lot of tutorial style quick videos on TikTok that I know, like someone like my wife always finds these like cleaning tips and that kind of things that she does utilize and put into real life.
Does she clean?
She does, yes. But that stuff she likes. She likes going and finding a quick tutorial like, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought of it cleaning this way or that way. So I do see it. There's still some value to TikTok in that sense, but all the dumb, parody videos and prank videos, that's what I can't stand.
Speaking of that, dumb TikTok stuff, there was a post that a girl, a TikToker with like 2.5 million followers, decided to take a rock and scratch up the front element of her 50-1.8 and was like, I just wanted to see what would happen. And then she takes a picture. She's like, I really like the ghosting effect that I got. I don't recommend that you do this to your lens, but it was kind of interesting to see what happened. She's literally taking a rock and scratching it up. It's like, what is wrong with you people? I mean, what's next? Putting crystals in front of your lens?
My issue is a lot of this you can recreate in post. So why damage a lens where it will permanently be like that forever?
But you can
when
buy,
you can just mimic it in post. It's the same as film. Like it's like taking film pictures and then
scratching
them into the
and then
computer.
scratching the negative. People used to do that shit.
But what I'm saying is I could easily just take a regular digital photo on the R5 or something like that and then make it look filmic and film-like without actually using a film camera. Now I get the nostalgia factor and everything, so I'm not saying film is useless, but
get this. When I used to work at Alan's camera or Ritz camera or whatever camera, there were always different types of filters to put in front of your lens. There were ones that were like broken that would create a different effect. So you don't need to go in and scratch. You could take a regular filter and scratch it instead of scratching your lens, you dumbass. Am I calling her a dumbass? Let me check with legal. Legal, is it all right if I call her a dumbass? I'm getting the nod. Yes, I can call that. Wait, don't call her a dumbass. Just say that it's a dumbass thing to do. Yeah, that's a dumbass thing to do, is to take a rock and scratch your lens. I don't recommend doing that. Thanks, thanks, legal. How much is that bill going to be? $400. Fuck you. We don't. Sorry, we do have a legal department. You have anything else to add to TikTok?
Their name is Jared as well, right?
Jared Lawyer Esquire.
No, I don't really care for TikTok that much. I really honestly haven't explored that avenue just yet. But like I said, my wife and I have a couple friends that are just insanely obsessed with it.
Yeah, I don't poo-poo it like TikTok is the worst thing ever. I'm like, no,
me either. No,
you can absolutely make some waves and build a following and get big. I found that if I've gone on TikTok, you absolutely do get sucked into just swiping and seeing what they recommend next. Because the thing about it is that you don't choose what to see, which is also a problem. The problem right now is you don't choose what you get to see, meaning you can't search for photography. I mean, I know you can search hashtags and you can do things like that, but it's like when it says that you follow a subject or follow a person, that person may get a TikTok that does like 1 million views, and then their next 5 have 2,000, right? And it's just like there's no rhyme or reason, because it's not like you get served it every time. They'll probably get to a point where they get more like YouTube. And the funny thing is, I probably should have said this with Reels becoming 90 seconds. It's like on Instagram, it's like, you mean Instagram TV? You're trying to do Instagram TV again, which already failed.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so much content out there, man. It's hard to keep up.
So let's move on to the Sony A7 R5 spec leak.
Yes.
Now, my question to you, Steven, is the super long list too perfect to be true, or is the fact that it's a super long list make it possibly more true?
Either someone is really good at trolling and they made this. I mean, look at our April Fool's videos. I mean, I go to town trying to make these specs actually seem realistic.
They're not
and very
real,
detail
Steven?
oriented. But with this spec leak, I mean, I don't know. I would think it is so detailed that it's probably true, because we've seen it, in the past where every time we go to a press event, it leaks beforehand and it's a laundry list of specs, and they're all 100% accurate. I mean, there's really never been a wild rumored spec that was not true.
Yeah, I
for the most part.
Well, there's been wild rumor specs, but
But when I'm saying those wild rumor specs are usually like there's 5 top level specs. It's not 30 detail oriented specs. So I'm gonna say, I don't know. I think that it could be true.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning more.
And it's about time that the A7R5 comes out anyway.
Well, the
A7R4 is pretty long in the tooth.
Well, what I'm going to say about that is I think that the reason that I think it's real is because if there was no pandemic, the R5 would have been out at least a year ago. It absolutely would have been out a year ago. And so with it floating around that long, the spec lists and papers, that stuff's already been done, and it's probably still someone had it and they might have sent it out. And if Sony Alpha Rumor says that it's fake, it's probably real at that point, even though they don't agree. But so
I mean, even the R7 and the R10, a lot of those specs were leaked. Wasn't it a couple weeks before we went out?
Before we knew anything, yeah.
Yeah, they found out basically before us. We found out the night of, when we went out to dinner and had the presentation with Canon.
Yeah, so in terms of specs, the main ones, they talked about a 61 megapixel sensor that's based off of the first sensor from the A7 R4 that is just modified and tweaked. And that's still 61.2 megapixels, which it's a very good sensor. And it's not something that Sony hasn't done before. When they went from the A7R2 to the A7R3, it still used the same whatever sensor, 36. I don't even remember what it was, but it still used it. It was just tweaked and changed. And
same with the A9 and the A9 II. I mean, that is the path that Sony typically goes down. They use the new sensors for a generation or two.
Right, with tweaks. And I don't...
Correct.
You know, I was talking to someone and they're like, well, why it's going to have to be like 100 because the A1 does 50 and that's too close to 61. But I'm like, yeah, but one is $7,000 and one is
exactly
is $3,400 or $3,300. I don't think the person that is looking for that camera is going to be like, well, shit, I should buy an A1 because it's 50 and this isn't enough at 61. I want more.
And my guess, the A7R5 will be more studio-centric and probably a lower frame rate, say 10 frames a second or something like that.
Well, that's what the spec sheet said.
That's mechanical.
The spec sheet said that now it is 10 frames a second, even in uncompressed RAW, whereas before it was
like
under
6
6 seconds. Yeah, it was right around 6 or less, between 5 and 6, when you shot uncompressed RAW. And so it dumbed it down because Sony's marketing was always, oh, it does 10 frames a second. And you're like, well, no, it doesn't. You're
12-bit compressed 10 frames a second.
You're not being forthright or forthwit. You're lying to us. But you're not lying, but you're lying.
Although Canon, will do that with, it shoots 30 frames a second or 26, whatever the R10 is. And, it does, but it's 12-bit compressed.
Right.
And, but you're also getting 30 frames a second.
Exactly. And there was nothing astronomically crazy about the specs that they listed. You can go read them over on their website or look at the Photo News Fix because we scrolled through them there, and I don't really want to go into all of it, but higher res EVF, 9.44 million dots. 9.44, yeah. I don't know why I remember the shit.
Which is the A1 EVF.
Steven can tell you that on my notes that I sent him for the episode, none of this information is in it. I'm just doing this off the top of my head.
And I got sent the notes literally 5 minutes before we started recording, so I can't recall off the top of my head what any of those Sony specs are.
Well, it's just that I did the Photo News Fix, and I read it once, and so I have the
you already
specs
did your
in
research,
my head. I can see them. Like, I can see what it says.
Same EVF as the A1.
Yeah, and the processor.
Yep.
The what do they call theirs?
The Bions.
Yeah, Bions XR. Yeah. So really not changing much. I don't expect the body shape to change. I don't expect the battery to change. The card slots.
The A7R4 was the first new body design, right?
Yeah, it was a good body. That's the one I took out on the Bernie trip.
Yep, but they fixed all the little things that we complained about, so I think that body's pretty solid.
Yeah, solid body.
No need to change it.
I do wish that their A1 felt more like an R3.
I agree. And it blows my mind that the A1 with a grip is actually heavier than an R3 with a built-in vertical grip.
Yeah. Well, the R3 is just a beautiful feeling light.
It's so light.
Just beautiful
people
body.
that have never held an R3, you will be blown away at how light it is, especially when you compare it to something like the Z9, which is a tank. Well, now I do feel like the Z9 I can drop and it's probably fine, and the R3 I could see having an issue.
I don't feel like I can drop any camera. I really don't like when people say that. Like,
I'm just saying the Z9 is so heavy duty. It seems like it, like I said, like a tank. Like you can run it over and it's fine.
It does. No, speaking of the Z9, the news reports, they were talking about the sensor is made by Sony. And I was like, cool. Like, what'd you expect? Sony's made a lot of the sensors in their high-end cameras. Like, I believe the D850.
It's designed by Nikon, but manufactured by Sony.
Yeah, so I asked what that meant. And what that really means is, say Sony manufactures these things, which means they have a listing of all the technologies that you can pick from, right? So let's say an ice cream truck is coming by, and the ice cream truck is there, and
everything's a la carte.
You get to pick the different flavors of ice cream and what type of cone do you want, and do you want it to be dipped in chocolate, or do you want it to be dipped in caramel? Do you want the caramel injected inside of the ice cream?
Ooh, how about all of it?
Like all of it. Okay, so Steven wants all of it. So basically what I'm saying...
So I'm Nikon and I want to buy all of it.
So basically what I'm saying is Sony has all of these technologies that you can pick from, and you say, I want this, 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 and this. Then that means it's developed by Nikon because they're picking it. So they're like, oh, we could do a 45 megapixel sensor that is stacked. All right, so they have the technology to do that. These are the parameters that we want. And so then their engineers go ahead and take the 90 different pieces that they can choose from, put it all together, shake it up, shake and bake, and then put it in the oven, easy bake oven, and then
out comes the Z9.
Out comes the Z9 sensor. So that's basically what I was told in the past. I don't give a shit about this stuff. Like, I don't care that Sony makes it. Like, cool, Sony makes great sensors. Nikon also does great color. Like, as we said in the past, we love those, like the files. So there's nothing wrong. And I honestly think, I don't think they made the J-Flet sensor back in the D2H, but at the end of the day, like, you're going to get great pictures if you know what you're doing.
I think Canon actually designs and
develops
and manufactures them in-house for their sensors. So that's think what we're told. Sony and Canon really. That's what we're told. Yeah, you never know. I do question. Obviously, it's a different division, the sensor division for Sony. Do they talk to the camera division? Are they NDA'd under Nikon to not disclose this information?
Phone call.
Is that why Sony's always one step ahead?
Hey guys, it's the engineers here. Nikon just wants to do this, and we're going to give you a secret. They can't do that.
I just question it because Sony is always one step ahead.
Well, you know why? Do you know
Nikon then responds, and then they're always another step ahead.
I know, but do you know why Sony's one step ahead? Because they manufacture everything, and they don't allow Nikon to use the technology until it's obsoleted, basically, until it's end of life. Which is why you never saw, when the Z9 or A9 came out and the A9 II, you're like, Nikon's not going to have a stack sensor
for a while,
but. That's really that. Canon on the other hand develops and manufactures their own to the best of my knowledge.
That's what we're told.
Yeah. So another news story before we get into some listener questions. This one just popped up today, and I'm going to be writing Photo News Fix tomorrow. I'm going to film it tomorrow because I'm going to be going to. Well, we already talked about Chicago, so I usually film on a Monday or a Tuesday. And so I'm going to do it a little early, but there's plenty of news stories. And one that stood out to me was LEICA is manufacturing a film camera out of titanium with a 50mm lens, and they're going to be selling it for $20,000, and there's 250 units. I ordered 2. Let's see, 250 times 20,000. That's just basically all you need to do is add some zeros. Is that going to be 25 million? 250 times, Jesus, Jared, can we use 250 times 20,000 is $5 million. That's it? Well, someone's got to pay for it. If they're only making 250, it's a supply demand. There's not going to be that many of them.
Yeah. I don't know who in their right mind would buy a $20,000 camera besides a doctor or a lawyer or someone that is extremely well off.
But you know what people do? These Leica people do when they buy these limited edition cameras, they put them on a shelf and they're like, it's a collectible item.
Exactly. It's a story to tell someone that comes over.
Breaking news, Steven.
What?
Leica is releasing an NFT camera. Shebang.
Oh, man.
I just drank some water. I had to do sound effects because people can't see me drinking the water because we're not doing it as video. So I had to do some sound effects. It's absurd, Steven, that they, I mean, you know what? It's not absurd. I actually think it's good business. They're great marketers, the Leica people. They are a very small company that has a lot of, they move a lot of revenue. They do some good revenue a year, and this is their niche. We're the supreme of camera companies.
Yeah, I mean, when you make it also a limited release, you're gonna get some hype out of it, and obviously you can really charge almost anything you want at that point.
Exactly.
When it's extremely rare.
All right, that's the news portion this week. We'll have more news stuff when we talk about more newsy stuff. We still want your feedback here, guys. You can always text us 313-710-9729. I will read through those. It's going to be easy. I don't know if I can search hashtags in this community client that it's called for texting, but you know what? Put a hashtag in there and just call it RAWtalk 002 hashtag. Put a hashtag in there and maybe I can search by hashtags all the responses that come back in reference to this episode so that I can go ahead and listen and look. That would be good. Speaking of listening and looking, we have listeners' questions here, and these came in via the text line 313-710-9729. I have a lot to go through still. I just went through and picked a couple of the ones that I saw, and once I got to a certain number, I'll go through and I'll read the rest and start making a list and check it twice for the next time. But the first one that came in, are we ready, Steven?
I'm ready.
It says, I'm learning a lot from your videos. Thank you. Oh, you're very welcome. I'm getting a camera for my wife. We enjoy birding. Down the road, I'll be buying an R5. I want to be able to share lenses and enjoy photography with her. I love what I see about the R7, but when I went to my camera store, they steered me away from the R7 and toward the R6. What would you suggest I get for my wife? And I was like, I need more information, because I was like, well, what did you say to them for them to say this? So the message back was, in considering price, he said for the additional $1,000. Now, mind you, it's what, $1,500 for an R7? $1,000 extra dollars is a lot of money in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about a $1,500 camera. What I would like, basically $1,000. I would like the R6 better and would be happier and not be disappointed, which is not a sales technique that I would use. You'll just be happier. You'll just trust me. Well, sometimes I would be like, at this point, I've shown you all of the results and shown you all this, so this is the way to go. Like, this is the way, but that doesn't always happen. I would like what?
I was just going to say to ask, is his wife looking to just take a couple pictures here and there? Is she looking to, how often is she going to be using it?
Exactly.
That's the question.
Good question, Stephen. So I would like the R6 better, and I would be happier and not be disappointed. She will be shooting birds mostly in the forest. Oh, birds in the forest as opposed to birds in the woods? She also enjoys sunsets. My conversation started with my wife can't operate our current Nikon D200, so I want a camera she could turn on and take high-quality pictures. I fucking hate that term, high-quality pictures, with not a lot of adjustments. He said the R6 was a pro-level point-and-shoot when set up. Well, then that makes the R7 a pro-level camera when set up, and an R10 a pro-level camera when set up.
Any camera to that extent, when you put it in auto mode, is a pro-level camera, a pro-level point-and-shoot, essentially.
Yeah. My answer here is, like, as a camera store person, I am not directing you towards the full frame and say you will just be happier. One, this camera store does not have an R7 yet. They haven't used it. I used it. Steven used it. Okay? Mm-hmm. We liked what we saw. Now, if I had my druthers, I would choose full frame all day, every day over crop sensor. But that's me.
Also makes sense for what you shoot and not for birding.
Right.
My question is, what's the budget?
Well, exactly.
And $1,000 more, that's another, almost half your budget.
I asked
doubling your budget. I
asked the guy, I'm like, is money an object? Because I'm going to ask, because that, that means something, of course.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, no, we can afford it, and so on and so forth. But really, at the end of the day, still knowing that the wife had a D200, they had a D200, she couldn't use it. It's not like you're going to turn on an R6, a mirrorless camera, and know how to use the damn thing, because you won't understand the focusing. You won't understand it. So I'm going to say save your money and then just invest in a longer lens, because you're not going to know how to use the camera anyway. And it sounds like you're not even going to learn how to use the camera, or she's not, which is perfectly fine. But I would rather have you not spend an extra $1,000 on a camera you're not going to know how to use.
I think he would have to set it up for her at first. And if you go in that all-encompassing focus mode, where the camera just basically picks what to focus on for you, especially in animal AF, I think it does do a pretty good job of finding a bird in a frame, especially if it's closer to like a full frame image. Now, I would probably go and say pick the R7 and pair it with something like a 600 or 800 f11, not the most expensive lens, but you get the reach on top of the APS-C sensor, and you're dealing with 32 megapixels and 30 frames a second. But I know it's electronic, and you're going to get some warping to a certain extent since it's not stacked. 15 frames a second mechanical is pretty solid. And again, you're getting that higher 32 megapixel sensor and the APS-C crop and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, that...
But it's still a pro-level camera in my opinion.
Exactly. And that's the type of thing that when I was selling cameras, I take into consideration. Does this person have a desire to take a step up to learn more about their camera, or do they not? Because if they don't, then I don't need to sell you the best of the best. Like
you're giving them a Ferrari and they're driving 40 miles an hour.
Right. They just don't need it. So yeah, I'm all for full frame, but they're not going to know how to get good results with full frame, and they're not going to know how to get good results with the R7. So I would probably just steer them to an R7. Though I told them, look, if money's no object, fine, get an R6. You have no problem getting an R6.
If yes, like you said, if money is of no object, then yeah, R6. But again, you're dealing with a 20 megapixel sensor at that point, and yeah, it's full frame and you can crop, but you're not getting the same reach and frame rate.
It's just even that sounds too complicated for
megapixels.
Someone who never knew how to use the D200. And we're talking D200. Yeah. We're going back 15 years already.
Yeah, I agree.
Next up, we got Scott Allen from Montgomery, Alabama. Well, Forrest Gump said
Greenbow, Alabama.
Your thoughts on the R7? Now, these are the ones that came through. I didn't just pick it because it said Canon. It's not like the money truck. What's that? The money truck's backing up to the door right now?
Beep.
Tell them to go away. We're on a podcast. We don't want them to think we're shilling. Anyway, your thoughts on the R7 and the crop factor, and this plays to Canon lenses, Sony and Nikon as well. Your thoughts on the R7 and the crop factor with the RF lenses versus waiting for a full lineup of APS-C lenses that accompany the R7 and R10. Now, the companies seem to be waking up to crop sensor again, but
yeah, I thought the market was going towards full frame, but yeah, it seems like crop sensor is coming back.
Right, but the other thing that I would say is, look, if you're serious about photography, you're probably not investing in crop sensor lenses. The reason is they don't grow with you. Whereas now the E mount, the RF mount, and the Z mount is a unified mount. So if you get the better lens, you get full frame lenses, you're going to be able to take them with you. Whereas the APS-C ones, you don't get to take with you at this point because it just ends up cropping things in.
Now, if you're like this last guy we just talked about, if you are a birder and you're strictly sticking with APS-C, then that's fine. But I remember when I first started out, I went from like a Rebel XT to eventually I got to a 7D. And instead of investing in APS-C lenses, I strictly went full frame because I knew eventually I was getting to that 5D level. That's what I always wanted to achieve. Now, granted, in hindsight, I wish I just went and bought the 5D in the beginning because I would have saved a bunch of money from instead of updating incrementally each time I got a new body to eventually go to the 5D. But the good thing is I can then bring that whole entire lens lineup and use it with my 5D. So it worked out in the end. But is that where you're going?
Yeah.
Is that the path you're going to go down?
So when I started with the D2H, you couldn't get wider angle glass, right? So that was a crop sensor camera. The Nikon wasn't actually, they claimed they were never going to make a full frame camera at that point, but they came out with a 17 to 55. Well, that's what I needed. I needed wide. They came out with a 12 to 24 f4. That's what I needed, right? The 12 to 24 was actually in a gray box and was the first DX lens they ever announced or that they released. And it made sense with the wider. It doesn't make sense with the long telephoto because you want more bang for your buck. So
Correct.
I personally wouldn't wait around. I would if you can get the better glass, get the better glass. If you want to grow with it. Now, if you're going to be just an amateur photographer and you just want to take better pictures, then all these companies are going to come out with some crop sensor glass that's fine. They're going to be good enough. So
and also keep in mind, I think a lot of people, when they see like a full frame lens and see 2.8 on a crop sensor, they're like, oh, I can have a 2.8 lens on a crop sensor body. I'm going to have 2.8. Technically, yes, you will still be at f2.8 in terms of aperture and f-stop, but keep in mind, you're still going to get a depth of field of, almost double that. So it might act more like an f4 lens. I think a lot of people assume like it's going to look more like a 2.8.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to have that still very blurry background.
Exactly. Moving on, a couple more questions here. We got John from Queens, New York City.
Hey, John.
Of course, it has an R7.
Thanks for calling in.
Of course, it mentions Canon again. Shit.
Oh, that's weird.
It's just,
who picked all these questions?
It's just
Jared,
weird. No, but this is the question. This is what came up. But it was a good question because
I mean, that last one was more general too. It wasn't.
Right. This could be general too. I also picked it so that I could yell at the guy, because that's really why I picked it. It has nothing to do with the Canon, but it's like...
And keep in mind, the R7's on everyone's mind right now. You know, it's a brand new camera. Everyone's talking about it. So.
His question is there a place for APS-C cameras in the bag of pros and serious enthusiasts? ? I'm looking to add the R7 to my R5 and R6 for birding and vlogging. Most reviewers seem to view it as a very good camera, but it's still an entry-level body rather than a possible alternative for serious shooters. Dude, what are you doing?
Cameras, man.
John from Queens, what are you talking about? You have an R5. You have an R6. You don't need a fucking R7. You don't need 3 bodies. You know, use your R6.
Yeah.
Use your R5. You don't even need the R6 for this. If you're going to go shoot birds, is he talking about birds?
He said birding and vlogging.
Yeah, you want to shoot birds, use the R5 so you have crop power if you really want. You got
vlogging, you want to go more full frame, so you have that wider,
right.
You know,
get the 16-2.8. Get the 16-2.8 RF, throw it on an R6. Yep. There's not much of a weight difference between the R7 and the R6. Is that correct, Steven? Or was there?
It's close. No, it's the R7's definitely lighter, but it's not crazy lighter.
Right. And so I just wanted to yell at John here and be like, John, you don't need an R5, an R6, and an R7.
I mean, I could see the birding thing again, bringing up full frame versus crop, but you don't need it is my thing. If he didn't have any cameras and he was questioning between the R7, R5, and R6, that's a different story. But the fact that you already own 2 of the best cameras on the market right now, there's really no need for an R7.
Exactly. All right, we've got Barrett from Pittsburgh, PA. A thing I've noticed recently, not your channel, is that a lot of channels I used to watch have all turned into either over-the-top bro culture or just rampant product pushing, which is simply useless. Thanks for staying true to actually providing real reviews and not just BS endorsements. Steven and I talk about this all the time. We see this happening.
Off air.
Well, yeah, off air. We don't go into too much in the way of details here. We don't go into too many details of that stuff because we talk internally about what people do, but we've noticed that there's certain channels that every single video that comes out is a sponsored video, regardless of what it is. It just seems like they're making videos because they have a sponsor opportunity to
because
fill.
They have
and yeah, because
to
they
make
have
the
to.
video.
So then they build the entire video around something that allows them to make it a sponsored video. Now,
correct.
With that being said, it's not like we haven't made videos that were built around sponsors because sometimes
we've done definitely dedicated sponsored videos for sure.
Absolutely. Because if there's companies coming and they're writing a big check, it's like, this is the stuff that pays the bills. When OnePlus came along, we're like, absolutely, we'll do a product showcase. I say that all the time. And it's clear, and we make it clear that they're product placements. And now YouTube has the button to click where it says this video includes product placements. Legitimately, it's like a MPA, PPA, or whatever the hell it's called, warning for movies. It doesn't mean anything at this point because just most videos have sponsors.
Video you watch it's checked off,
right? Yeah. But we make it a point that we've got Photo News Fix. Clearly, has this fix is brought to you by. Awesome place to put an ad. But we don't make videos just to do ads unless it's for ourselves. Also.
I think the issue that I see, like we were just mentioning, is that it just feels very forced. Like they're only making the video because they have to make the video because
the sponsor needs it out at this time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. So,
and at the end of the day, hey, it's a business. It's their job. It's our job. I mean, you do need to make money.
Yep. I don't downplay that at all, and that's why I don't. We won't do, as we always say, sponsored reviews. We can call it a product showcase, but it will never say, I recommend you buy this because of X, because someone's paying us to make that video. But I rather showcase what it's capable of doing and then let you make your mind up.
It would obviously be an incredibly biased review if it was a sponsored review. So that's one thing that it ticks me off personally, is when people are doing these sponsored reviews, and obviously they're in favor of the product because they're getting paid for it. So
well, it's like listening to ambassadors for Canon or Nikon or Sony.
Yeah, they're clearly going to be all pro Canon and pro Sony, pro Nikon.
Exactly. That's why you won't see me.
They legally can't say anything negative about them.
Right, they're told they can't. And that's why you won't. People are like, well, if you were an explorer of light or a Nikon ambassador, but they'll never ask you. I'm like, do you ever think that I would never? First off, these companies would bend over backwards if I was like, Canon would be like, you want to be an explorer of light? Okay, here's the contract. They would.
I truly think if you reached out to any of them, any of the big three, and asked to be an ambassador of some sort, they would all definitely do it.
Oh, Jared,
I don't think you would ever do it.
Oh, Jared, we want you. Jared, please.
Sit in this chair. Here's a fan. Here's some grapes.
Pick us.
Here, Jared.
Pick us. Would you like some sprinkles on your ice cream?
Who has the biggest money truck?
Yeah. Yes. Who here can back up that truck? Back that thing up better to my door? Is it you, Pentax? Because if it is, what about Leica? Wouldn't that be the shit? Now, the question is, Steven, someone comes along and says, we'll give you $10 million. Well, okay, we'll give you $5 million to be a product ambassador. What do you think? Do it or not do it?
One, I don't think it would ever happen, that kind of money. And two, to keep your integrity, I would say no, personally.
I wouldn't take it. I couldn't take it. I think at 10 million you start to question, because then it's like not that 5 million isn't life-changing money, but 10 million, and then you got to pay taxes, and I'm in this different tax bracket because we sell all these ads because the money trucks keep backing up, so then my tax bill gets higher, which means Uncle Sam takes more from me, and then I got to, oh my God. One, the integrity thing is absolutely there. You can't buy me off for that stuff. It just doesn't happen, because I'm going to tell you what I think no matter what, regardless. But like, we make good money running this business, and would you kill your good name and your business to sign up for a ton of money? Like if Olympus came along,
you're literally becoming a sellout at that point.
Which I've like, speaking of that, when I was in Miami, and I was being arm candy. What I mean by arm candy is I was the date. So I was the pretty looking one for the date. My friend, she was in the morning watching some bullshit show on E where these people talk about topics. And they were talking about Justin Timberlake selling his catalog for $100 million, right? He sold the rights to his songs and his catalog for $100 million. And they're like, this was not a good move. Just look at what Bob Dylan sold his for, and look at what Bruce Springsteen sold his for $500 million. That's $500 million. That's 5 times more. And I'm like, he's also in his 70s, and Bob Dylan's in his 80s. It's $100 million fucking dollars. He's not going to regret selling "Cry Me a River." Oh, cry me a river. He's not gonna regret selling that because he got $100 million. Like, these people that sit in these rooms and get paid to talk about this bullshit on TV, it's like, screw you guys. It's $100 million. So if someone came with 10 million,
amount of money,
someone came with 10 million, I would have to think about it. But then again, at the end of the day, I'd be like, I mean, look, if Canon was like, honestly, if Canon or Sony came by, it might be an easier decision than if Nikon came by. No offense to Nikon, but $10 million is a lot of freaking money. And then you don't have to worry about, like, if you working harder, but I like working. So, no, 10 million wouldn't even be the number. Because I couldn't, basically my site's dead. Because once you take that money and you can't make reviews of other products, you're fucking done.
1000%.
You're out. It was like Manny Ortiz, and I'm not saying Manny Ortiz got paid off. I bring up being done because Manny Ortiz was all about Sony, right? He was an artist, not an artist, in the ones were a collective, part of the collective. Sony had a collective. Sony did a great marketing thing where they went to all these Instagram people and other people around and was like, do you want to be part of the collective? We'll take you on some trips. We'll send you some gear to use. We'll give you some swag. And that was it, right? And Manny, and I don't think I'm talking out of line here, was afraid to leave the collective because he thought that if he left the collective, he wouldn't be able to get gear to review from Sony. And I was like, no, the opposite's going to happen. If you leave the collective, you're now free to review all the other manufacturers' stuff. So you're not just limited to Sony. The whole world opens up to you, and he's obviously grown substantially since we had that discussion. And Sony still sends him gear to review because he's sought after as a voice in the industry, and he does a great job. So that's what happens when you expand your reach.
And even going back to your early days in the beginning, I feel like 99% of your videos were based off Nikon because that's what you shot. That's who you were. That you shot
That's
Nikon.
all I knew.
That's all you knew. And then I came into the fold and we started kind of slowly doing Canon and other cameras. And then Sony finally started inviting us out to press events and we became pretty much covered every camera manufacturer at that point, minus maybe like Fuji, who doesn't really like to deal with us half the time, or Olympus, or it's mainly the big three at this point. But you really need to expand and start covering more.
So I got to wrap up, Steven. I got that call. I got that mentorship thing that I need to do. Jesus, it got late on us because we started later. But I think this was good. You can call us, text us, 313-710-9729. Let us know what you think about this stuff. Hashtag RAWtalk002.
Yep.
Anything you want to add before we go, Steven?
No, just again, let us know if you prefer the video format over the audio format. Let us know if you're liking what you're listening to, if there's anything you guys want to recommend. Just any additional comments at all about the podcast would be helpful. Also, we're looking to schedule these out and release them every Friday. It seems like most of you guys want them for the weekend, so definitely stay tuned and look on Fridays, whether that's midnight on Friday or sometime during the day, but we are trying to shoot for a Friday release date.
Yup. So thank you guys very much for listening. I'm going to wrap this one up. Jared, PolinFrontosphoto.com. Bye, Steven.
Bye.